Well, Mandy, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, this is round two because you came on to promote your first book, Love Yourself Sober, Self-Care Guide to Alcohol-Free Living for Busy Mothers. That's such a good book.
Thanks.
Did you love it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that Kate's not here. So I wrote them with Kate Bailey, who's another
Yeah.
coach. But yeah, we wrote both books together, and I think the first one was, yeah, it was your baby, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
it was all of our story. It was a lot of our experiences and all the kind of stuff that had got us from, drinking to sober. So yeah, there's there's something special about it. The second one was harder to write. We will get into that, but
The sophomore
we,
album. Yeah.
yeah, we got there, and I'm super proud of it, and it's beautiful. It looks so pretty, the second one.
It is so, the cover is so beautiful.
Mm.
I absolutely, you guys did a great job. So the second book that we're going to be talking about today is Love Your Sober Year. And we'll get into it in a second, but I do love the structure of the book where it's it's like an annual view, but it honors the seasons, right? Like I always thought of, this time of the year, we're recording this in the fall. And I was sort of always taught, in self-development, like this is the time to go inside, like bears hibernate, they go
Yeah,
within. And this is the time to really do the self-examination and go in. And so I noticed that, you honor the seasons and sort of what comes naturally in the rhythm of being a human being, and during these times. So we'll definitely get into it, but we're going to start with something. I call it the lightning round, but it's very low because it's a discussion. But I like to put some resources right up front. So when you first got sober, what was the book that helped you the most? Was there any book that sort of spoke to you?
yeah. Well, I mean, a few, because it took a while, so I went back and
Yeah.
forth. But the first book that really resonated with me was The Sober Revolution, which is Lucy Rocker, who is the founder of Soberistas, which is an online um, anonymous forum for people, and that's actually where I first started out. And yeah, it's a brilliant book.
Yeah, the sober. That's so interesting. How did they have anonymous forum?
Because you set up little, like, some people use their own name, but most people use a moniker or whatever it's called. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to call myself, oh gosh, I can't even remember.
But it's not something that's done through Facebook, or it's not a
No,
private
so
face. Oh, it's
no,
completely
it's, yeah, yeah,
anonymous.
yeah. So when she
Mm.
came up with the idea, it'll be 10-year anniversary this year. There's about
Wow.
kind of 80,000 members worldwide, mostly women. Um,
80,000.
yeah. Um, she had the idea of making like a mum's net. I don't know if you have that in the States, but mum's net is kind of a forum where people can chat about different parts of being a parent. So she had that idea of creating something like that for sober people.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's like different groups for age and inspiration or resources and things like that. There's a chat room function.
Mm.
um, and yeah, I mean, it's been her lifelong work. I mean, it costs millions to run each year.
I mean, that's not 80,000 people, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I think she gets some funding from charities and stuff like that, but mostly it's funded by, I think it's £20 a year. It's really not very much, or $20 or something,
It's
but
less than
yeah.
it's less than drinking.
Yeah.
It's less than
Yeah,
a
but
night
I
of drinking.
remember, like, because I first started on my sober journey about like 9 years ago, and I remember at that time it was free, and she got a lot of backlash when she put a bit of membership which is one of these interesting conversations we have, right? Recovery should be free, but it's like, well, how do you manage I think it grew from like, sort of 200 people to like 15,000 in like 6 months or something, because it was really early on. It was a long time ago. So
Yeah.
it's like, how it's not sustainable. But anyway,
I mean,
so
even 12-step programs aren't free. Like everybody has to kick in a couple dollars to pay for things like the room and refreshments and things. So why is it that people think that it should be free? Do you think?
I think it's just, I get the moral respect to care for people in a way which is not exploitative. Like, I get that. So someone that is, struggling with an addiction, or someone that is in pain, needs respectful care. But yeah, I don't know where this comes from. I don't know where it comes from that in this circle that everything should be free, when nothing's free in life. But it's about getting the balance right. But and I think
Well, it's so
also
funny.
go on.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I think also that when you get to a certain point in an addiction, when your brain becomes very narrow, before you can get that opening up, when you come into recovery, everything gets very black and white and very narrow. And I think sometimes that's where people are stuck. Sometimes when they come out with this thing, it's just like they can't see the picture of it, because they're still in their kind of early recovery and holding on to the things that worked for them. And that's just a part of the process. And I know certainly some of my kind of old school recovery friends, it took a long time to accept that there were things outside of AA, or things could be different. And that was just part of their process of kind of getting their all the brain working online, and just sort of
adopting
opening
new
up.
ideas. It's really a process of changing your thinking. It's your mindset and all that. I know. I think the idea of free is almost a religious concept, where you go to church for free. Maybe you don't do, even in church you're supposed to be doing tithing. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. Okay, but thank you for the book recommendation. I had not actually read The Sober Revolution, so I'm gonna have to put that on my list. I'm obsessed with books, right? Like I have 170 titles now on my phone. Love it. Maybe that's a problem. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you live by? Something that sort of is a reoccurring theme in your life?
Yeah, and it was something that came from a conversation about the 12 steps, actually, and around the God word, which we talked about briefly earlier, and from Tammy Salas, who does work in this space, amazing kind of artist. And she said that when she first went into recovery, someone said, "For me, it's grace over drama."
Ooh.
And I loved that. Something just resonated so deeply with me, because so much of my drinking and life was chaos. It was just like chaotic. And that kind of concept of choosing grace over drama just just resonated. And that's been one that I've shared with clients, and probably will be a tattoo one day. And just and when I get lost in my own thinking, I just go, just take time out, just breathe it in, take grace over drama, just let it go, just move away from that. So that's my favorite.
I love that. It does put a little distance. It creates that little space and a little detachment between, your anxiety and tension and maybe what's going on. That idea of letting go is so powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you have a regular self-care routine? And that can be like either a morning, or maybe you have like a weekly practice. Or I was just talking to somebody who mentioned that they go to a retreat annually. So I was like, oh, you and I go to the She Recovers events. But what does that look like for you?
Well, I go to yoga. I try to go at least once a week or twice a week. I read. I run, I take baths. I think that was the thing that helped me the most, certainly in that early period where you had those cravings, you know, kind of mummy wine time cravings around 6-7 o'clock. I'd just jump in the bath. That was just, you know, so I still take a lot of baths, and there's something really kind of rebellious about having a bath at like 11 in the morning. You know, it's like, who does that? It's like, I don't know, you know, it fits me, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to take a bath right now. Like, it doesn't have to be before bed. I'm just going to do it now when I want to.
Breaking all the rules.
I know. Well, I think that's part of it, right? It's like tap, because I was such a rebellious character. It's like I have to tap into that in my sobriety the ways that you can. Get your kicks where you can. And you know, I have a coach myself. I have, you know, groups that I go to. I don't
like support groups.
Yeah. I am doing a reparenting course with Sibel at the moment, who's another She Recovers coach. Yeah. I go to Al-Anon sometimes. I go to ACA sometimes. I go to She Recovers, our internal kind of coach meetings, and then just check in with other friends that are, you know, within my support group. Yeah, I have a few. There's a few coaches that are in France that we kind of chat sometimes, and
check in. That's really important. I mean, community is so huge, and a lot of these things that you mentioned are really, you know, support based, you know, connection based, right? Community is about connection. I love that. And I've been asking people to share their spiritual experience stories. You know, they say that alcoholism is a disease of isolation, and connection facilitates the cure. Did you have a story that came up for you when we were discussing it earlier?
Yeah, so because I have kind of complex PTSD from my kind of from my life,
from life, yeah.
for all the things. And when I started doing EMDR, I had to go through a process of kind of, you have to create your safe space, and you had to, you know, your yeah. And what happened kind of through that process was that essentially I wouldn't let the treatment happen. Like I was super resistant. So she was like, right, you know, we need to kind of go in internally and kind of talk to your kind of inner protector, whatever that might look like, and just sort of say that you're safe now and that we can start to do this work. And, you know, so we did lots of kind of visualization and meditation around that. And so my inner protector was a wolf. You know, when I sort of visualized it, I was in the big forest and there was this wolf that was sat there. And so, you know, I sort of had a chat with the wolf. It's just like, you know, it's okay, like, it's all right, thank you for your kind of looking after me up until this point, but, you know, we're going to get better together. And, you know, but the wolf has continued to kind of follow me around. So I had a big kind of crossroads with my work-life balance at the beginning of this year when we were in Miami, and I was asking a lot of questions about what I wanted to do and what I needed to do to kind of make sure I was showing up for my kids and being, you know, available. And we were doing the yoga in the morning with Taryn, and she was reading that poem as well. It's a kind of,
that's right,
yeah, it's that piece by, oh my goodness, I'm gonna forget now. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Right, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Thank you. Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert. And it was the piece was called, I wrote it down, Not This.
Not This.
And so I was lying there listening to that, and there was the sunshine coming through the window, and the wolf just came and just sort of sat, you know, in in the window, and I just sort of looked up and just was just like, okay, it's just like, you've got to make decisions for you. And so I've I made the decision to step back from Love Sober, which I created with Kate. We did the podcast for a long time. We wrote the 2 books together. I love her. She's, my best friend, but having a company in another country, I live in France, she lives in England, trying to do workshops in the UK, all of that energy is taking time away from my kids, and my daughter's 16, my son's 14, and I just knew that I was missing quite a critical point of just being here. So yeah, and I had another experience recently when I had to make a big decision, and then I just was driving along, and then there was just this kind of big poster of a wolf, for the zoo, and I was just like, oh, okay. So that's my kind of and I'm like literally the least spiritual person in the world, so for me to even identify anything like that is big, but I'm taking the signs that whenever I see the wolf, it's just a little nod to just that connection with protecting my inner needs, because I'm notoriously a people pleaser and all those things, so
yeah, I relate to that so much. It's so interesting that when we sort of do that internal work, how the signs show up on the outside, right? And really the outside is a reflection of what's going on the inside. But there's this idea of this consciousness that you're sort of paying attention. Did you have those feelings of connectedness that sort of go along with the spiritual experience? Like something was out there guiding you or protecting you?
I mean, I think especially if you've had a lot of trauma, it's very hard to be in your body and to be able to be receptive to those things, because any moment of real inner peace is terrifying, right? Because it's like, I've been hypervigilant for most of my adult life, so to be able to be in those moments of utter kind of vulnerability, which I think is that space of spirituality when you really are just open, is very hard for me to even open the door to a tiny little bit. But because I was in that room, being guided by Taryn, who I love, surrounded by hundreds of women in recovery, that I think that community held that space for me enough for me just to be able to be like, and feel it, and that warmth and that kind of just connection of just like, I got your back, and this is the path, look towards. Because I think I've been running away from the pain of my kids growing up. It's just heartbreaking. The moment they're born, right? You have to at some point let them go. And so it was a real moment of like, okay, like if actually continuing to work all the time is a sort of form of self-harm, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is a whole thing about workaholism and people pleasing, and
right. It's like, oh, here we go, another thing. Put down the drink, and then what have we got left to like figure out?
Yeah. Well, it really kind of all stems from the same thing, right? It's like we get, and that's what recovery to me is about, is getting to root causes and conditions and healing from the root, instead of trying to manage the symptoms. We're healing at the root cause. And one thing you mentioned about being in a safe space is, in the group setting, is the idea that safety facilitates healing. Right. And so often, I was talking to a gal recently who was like, oh, she had some trauma, and she was like, I don't even want to face it. And I was like, she was like, it's too scary. And I said, what would you need in order to feel safe? And she really just did that moment where she like took a step back and was like, wow, I've never even thought about that. And it's so interesting.
Brilliant question. Yeah.
Right. Isn't that good? It's like, what do we need to feel safe? Like you and I as facilitators, that's our job, is to create the safe space. So that
100%.
We see that when people feel safe, we've experienced it when we feel safe, our stuff comes up and we often get our answers.
Yeah.
But I think that's why community is so important in recovery, because it's too hard to face alone. So we don't. But thank you for sharing that story. That's a perfect example of how feeling safe, it allows us that connectedness and that guidance. That's beautiful. Well, that was my lightning round. I told you it wasn't it's not slow. There's just a fun place to kind of warm up. But so I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to your first episode where we really got into your story. But could you give sort of like a little, I know you're not 12-step oriented. We might have to change that. We were talking earlier. But I think it's so important for people to understand that there are many, I'm a 12-step advocate, but I am aware, well, you're living proof that there are many paths to recovery. So could you give us a quick synopsis of?
Quick synopsis. So I've been sober now continuously for 5 years. Thanks. So I have my 5 years this year. Been on the path for 9 years. So I mean, I guess I was, well, not I guess, I was lucky. Lucky is a strange word, but essentially I live in France, so far away from my family and my friends. Had always been a big party girl, lots of drugs and alcohol growing up. From the age of about 13 onwards.
13.
Sort of 90s rave scene in the UK, lots of kind of festivals and, you know, free parties and all of that, and a lot of kind of sort of ecstasy and cocaine and all of those things at that time. And actually, I mean, I was always drinking, but my drinking really shifted when I was a mum and when I moved to France and when I stopped doing those things, because they're not, you know, socially acceptable when you're a mum, right? So
you're not supposed to take ecstasy and cocaine when you have a baby. That's weird.
And so and I think that's quite an important point, that actually, you know, we then go into heavy sort of drinking, or like wine, you know, drinking wine because that's okay, you know. And it very much was at that point, you know, on social media there was a lot of like, you know, that real parenthood movement, which was great, of just being like, this is actually what's going on, you know, people sharing on Instagram that actually it's quite hard, and the juggle between being a mum and having a career, and but, you know, here's the solution, we'll just drink wine or have a gin, you know, and the gin mummy and all of that stuff. And I kind of got caught up in that being allowing my problem with alcohol, essentially, you know, because everyone else seemed to be doing it. So I mean, what they didn't see was me finishing the bottle and then blacking out and passing out on, you know, on the sofa or whatever. And maybe they just did have one gin, but that wasn't what was going on for me. And so I was working in a university, had quite a kind of good job, and teaching, had 2 kids under 6. My husband working away a lot, and just was in total burnout basically. And my way of coping was just drinking, you know, a bottle of wine in the evening, or, you know, sort of, I just lost completely who I was. And I'd go to the bar with the kind of the young professionals and the professors that didn't have kids, and then I kind of like stumble home and I just didn't know who I was, and lots of unprocessed trauma. I had insomnia. I was, you know, using sleeping pills to sleep, and so I ended up kind of in burnout really, and my drinking was secondary to my mental health kind of crisis. So I went to the doctor, who happened to be an addiction specialist and happened to be a CBT therapist at the same time. And he kind of just held me at that point and was just like, you know, let's start doing therapy together. And I got put on antidepressants, and it was only kind of halfway through that I started to realize that actually I kind of knew that alcohol was not helping, but I couldn't really stop. And that kind of went on for about a year. And then my sort of, my mental health stabilized a bit. And then I found Soberistas online because I was kind of Googling, am I an alcoholic? Do I have a problem with alcohol? And through sort of support of peer support, just sort of started playing around of trying to stop. And then I did a year, and everything got better. Mental health was better, like quit my stressful job. We moved to the seaside, made loads of I ran a half marathon, everything was
Oh, wow.
and then I thought, oh, well, maybe I can have a drink every now and again. So I had a real fix between, getting better mental health wise meant then I could be a normal person, and normal people drink. And then then I had like back and forth of about 3 years, kind of drinking for about 2-3 months, and then going, oh, I can't do this anymore, I hate it, and my sleep getting really bad. And then I had another quite bad kind of mental health episode, and I got put on sort of psychiatric care because I wasn't sleeping at all. And then I started getting help. I got diagnosed with complex PTSD and started getting help on that side of things. And then I found Instagram, really. That was my second home for sort of my sober journey, and started blogging and making friends. And then a few people talked about She Recovers, and then I started getting involved with that. And then and that was it, and I just kept on trying different things, reading loads of books, and just kept on trying. And then I read Annie Grace's book, and we were on holiday in Spain, and I had this moment when my son, it was, it's that classic thing about your behavior, that you keep putting rules around your drinking, and then you slightly change the rules, then they get a little bit less further away from your values, right? So one of my rules was that I'd never drink when the kids were up, and I would never drink when they were in the swimming pool. So we'd been on holiday for 2 weeks, and then it was like, oh, well, they're doing really well in the swimming pool, so I can sit on the edge and just have a glass of wine. And my son jumped in the swimming pool and hit his head on the cover, and I literally had a glass of wine. I hadn't taken a sip, and it was just that moment of like, so my husband jumped in, pulled him out. He was fine. He like cut his eyebrow open, but we went to hospital. We had to have stitches. But it was just that moment of just like wine in hand, that thing, the thing I said I'd never do, and that was it. And I haven't drank since.
Amazing, man. There was so much in that story that I was like jotting down notes. I was like, wow, that's so relatable, right? There is that, it's so common. It's like we quit drinking and things get better, and we're like, maybe it was just a phase, maybe I'm better now. But the back and forth, when you talked about the back and forth over a 3-year period, man, that is such a painful experience. Did you find that it was absolutely necessary, though, for you to answer that question of whether you could drink successful or not? Like that you had to practice abstinence?
It's a good question. I mean, I wish I'd never had. I wish I'd say like I've got 9 years sober. Like I don't think I took a lot of risks in that time, but I also accept that that was my path,
right?
I don't think I had enough conscious awareness of it, because it was such a kind of on-off switch. It's literally as soon as I had that drink, I was like, of course, like it's fine, drinking's fine. And then it would just be like everything would start, and I would say to my husband all the time, when it would start to then shift to the negative, like, wasn't I happier when I didn't drink at all? And he would be like, yeah. And I was like, didn't I sleep better? He'd be like, yeah. And then I'd just be like, okay, la la la, and then,
Just checking.
just checking, gonna drink for another month and a half until and I had that rule in my head. It's like, if I wake up again at 4 a.m, that's it, I can't drink. So that was kind of like that was my thing. And so then every time I'd get that night where I'd be, you know, hot, sweaty, like massive hangover at 4 in the morning, just be like, okay, that's it. But I had so much emotional work to do, so much, you know, healing to do, so much
Right.
cognitive awareness to do around all of it, that I don't think I could have done it, because every time I learned something new, and then I picked up another tool. And that first year it was very much like moving away from a problem. I had not in any way shaped the path of being a sober person. I was just trying to get away from the kind of chaos that my life had become. And I think that's the difference when you start to go to become someone that's sober and get it and want it. And, you know, and I needed all of that back and forth to go, actually, I choose this, because I had made friends that then I couldn't hang out with anymore because I wasn't sober anymore. And actually I miss those people more, you know, and I realized they showed up for me more than my drinking friends did. And all of those little shifts. It's just the way it had to be, I suppose. But I'm so grateful that I didn't, like, you know, I did, and it didn't get any worse, you know.
Right. Yeah. I just think it's so important that, you know, if you do choose a sober life, that you come to the conclusion that, you know, we don't process alcohol the way maybe normal people would. Right. It's like it's not just physiological, but it's that mental obsession and that sort of spiritual malady that it's an important question to answer, you know, and it does take sometimes it does take a long time to answer that question. And it's hard to like maybe let go of the idea it could have been any different. I think I love the idea that there are no mistakes, that there are only lessons, and a lesson is repeated until we get the lesson. Like that's sort of like the grace that you were talking about, the grace over drama. It's like it's just a lesson. It's a lesson that's repeated until we get the lesson, and we have evidence that we learn the lesson by a change in behavior. And that sounds like that's what happened to you. If that spared me to summarize your experience. Here, let me summarize your experience. No, thank you for sharing. And I'm so curious, you know, you did mention, and I'm not trying to get you to share something you don't want to talk about, but could you describe the nature of your CPTSD? It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't think it's talked about enough. And sometimes, especially women who have it, or people who have it don't recognize that that's what it is, because complex sort of speaks to this idea that it's pervasive, persistent, and ongoing. So in the mind of the person that has it, it just feels that's what like normal life is like. So what does all
I mean, I think some of the things that I've realized in the last kind of couple of years, and again, this is why, you know, recovery is a process over your life, right, is that I hadn't really understood the kind of intergenerational aspects of my family systems. And, you know, there's long histories of kind of mental health problems on both my mum and my dad's side. So, you know, the family that they created, which is full of love and full of wanting to do the best as a response to their own childhood, made for a very what's the word, enmeshed space. And that was something that I'd never really kind of understood until very recently. And I had quite a serious sexual assault when I was 18. And I, at the time that there was a lot of violence and a lot of disassociation and a lot of, you know, things that I blacked out around for a very long time. But I said to the person, my friend that I was with, I was traveling in Mexico at the time, and I said, I never want to talk about this. No, you know, and so bless her, like she didn't ever ask me about it or anything for about sort of 15 years, I think. And I didn't speak to anyone about it for about at least 10 years. So as you say, when something becomes so within you, it just, that state of hypervigilance, that state of trauma, that state of disassociation just became my way of being, because I'd never let it out. I didn't speak about it. I didn't talk about it. All that shame, all of it, this is my fault, I created this situation, all of those things lived within my nervous system, lived within me, and still does. But you know, I've done obviously a lot of work around it since then. So yeah, those kind of two things together sort of led me. And I suppose, you know, I was always seeking that safety, you know, and I think alcohol gave, you know, it's like, let's, no shame, right? It gave me a solution until it didn't work anymore, right? It helped until it didn't. It was a coping strategy, you know. That's what addiction is, right? It's just, it's a way of coping when we don't have any other solutions. So yeah, so it's like, if something's complex, it means that there's probably more than one layer. And you know, as you, I mean, you described it perfectly, in the sense that it, you know, it becomes just your state of being. And that can be from many, it doesn't have to be from some, you know, big shock trauma. It can just be from, it can be from chronic stress over a long period of time. So whether that's feeling unsafe in your family home, whether that's bullying, whether that's racism, whether that's, you know, any form of discrimination or feeling of unease, can create that within someone where they just they can't ever be at peace.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I had to write that down, you know, trauma being chronic stress over a period of time. You know, it's in a response to that stress. And then we develop these covering strategies, coping mechanisms to, you know, disassociate from it. And it's so interesting, because the conversation around trauma, I think, has really evolved from, you know, things like witnessing a murder, or, you know, sexual assault, or to also include like the little t trauma, like the ongoing persistent, like having a critical parent, or just that could be like what you were saying, many examples. So and they say that addiction is, you know, a sign of a deeper problem. So I love that it is sometimes that symptom, like alcoholism, or, you know, a multitude of you know, dysfunctions, mental health issues, lead us to that core issue that needs to get healed. I want to transition a little bit. I just want to say that the first book that you guys wrote is such a beautiful way of examining the relationship with alcohol, especially for women, because it sort of tells the narrative of how we fall into this sort of mommy wine culture, and how destructive it can be, and what all that feels like. So if you're in that place of early recovery, I highly recommend the book. It is so gentle and loving, you know, loving yourself back to, you know, a healthy place.
Thank you.
Yeah. But let's transition a little bit to Love Your Sober Year. Can you tell me a little bit? Do you want to sort of describe the concept of the book?
Yeah, I must say Kate is much better at describing the concept. So I'm sorry that she's not here to join in, because I think that Kate loves anything seasonal. So she is the queen of seasonal self-care. Like, she absolutely loves when it becomes, you know, autumn, and she can, you know, put the lights on and go inside and get woolly socks on, and you know, she gets very excited about Christmas and that transition, and you know, the old traditions of Yuletide and what it really means, you know, the essence of it. And so I guess what we came from a perspective of our work with women, understanding that something happens around transition periods. So be it motherhood, or the menopause, or, you know, your children leaving the house, or getting married, you know, or coming home at the end of the day. Like, there's this period of like, those are the trigger points, right? When you kind of come home and you go from that daytime nervous system state of running around and stuff like that to like being in the evening state, and we use alcohol or whatever it is to help those transitions. It's an helpful way in the end, but there's a use around that. So we started talking about cycles and cycles of nature, and what we could learn from that essence of, okay, so in autumn or fall, the leaves fall from the trees, the animals go into hibernate. What do they use to manage that transition time into winter? And then in winter, what are we doing? Right, we're resting. We're really looking after ourselves. We're just, the fields go fallow. Nothing's happening really. It's just that kind of that real quiet. And then in spring, there's that sort of intention setting. There's the seeds being planted. There's that kind of new life coming up. So it's much more of an action, there's something happening there. And then in summer, you've got that real full on, not only kind of seasonally, but also for us, it's a very, very active and very, can be a season of overwhelm. And both for Kate and I was our worst period of drinking. We do okay over sort of, the spring, and then the summer would hit and just all the rules go out the window, and all of a sudden you're on vacation for a long time, and and everyone's drinking all day, and all of those things just impacted how we drank. And then we would see that we would get a lot of women coming to us in September when the kids go back to school, and would find that. So we just kind of got really quite obsessed about transition cycles. Excuse me. So we came up with this R4 balance methodology, or just a framework. So R being for spring being restore. So looking at sort of growth, preparation, what do we need, the tools that we need, setting intentions. And then summer being reignite. So that kind of fire energy, action, what's going on. And then rewrite in autumn, so that kind of release, that maintenance, that kind of looking after ourselves, going back inwards, as you say. And then rest in winter, just being that kind of restorative period. So the book is written over the year, so each week you have a different kind of topic, and then you have some journaling questions, and it's just meant to be a very gentle sort of guide, support, either you can pick up as and when you want. So it might be you want some sort of support around, because there's stuff around stress management, there's stuff around relationships. Maybe you're feeling a little bit of that energy at the moment, of that kind of summer, and everything feeling really like you want to take action. Or maybe you're feeling like you just want to go inward, and then respecting the seasons of fundamentally, what do you need, because that's what self-care and self-leadership is about. It's about asking us, what do I really need behind what I'm doing? So it was a way just to bring everything together. So yeah, and it's highly designed, it's very pretty.
Pretty.
Yeah, we just wanted it to be a nice gift, really. Yeah, so it looks at cycles, sobriety, looks at self-care, intention setting, reflection, and also kind of we look at the equinox and the solstice, and just kind of what we can sort of, because each season has its own kind of fairy tales and its own mythology and its own kind of things. And it's nice to kind of not only, well, we know as professionals, right, that we need to use our left brain, the logic, the facts, but we also need that emotional side of our brain, the creativity, the kind of, yeah, the want, the need, the desire to change our behavior. So
Right.
behind that too is trying to work, you've got some facts in there, but you've also got kind of creative ideas and magic and awe and wonder and all of those things that are practices of happiness. And if we can get satisfied and happy, then why would we drink, right?
Right. I think you did a beautiful synopsis. You're amazing. You don't even know it. No, I really love the idea. There was a couple of things that struck me about this that I love so much is that, I do have practices that I really love in my own life, but I have this awareness that it needs to be like I need to switch it up every once in a while. Otherwise, it becomes rote and
Yeah.
it loses all meaning. Right. And so I love that there's this idea that you can sort of look at different things. And so you kind of cover all the things. I'm looking at autumn. So that, week 1, it says, harnessing the power of the gifts of autumn to rewrite, which is kind of funny because I'm rewriting my manuscript right now. I was like, oh, is that serendipity? I don't know.
It's a
But
spiritual moment.
it was my spiritual experience today.
Yeah.
I was reviewing all this stuff and I was like, oh shit, yes. But so you have this broken out in weeks. There's 13 weeks. And so it's a planner. Who doesn't love a planner, right? That gives me a sense of security, purpose, plotting forward, progress. I love that. But it's starting an intention with letting go, and that does tie into autumn as the leaves let go. Letting go is a huge part of transformation. I love that concept because in order to arrive at a new place, we sort of have to let go of the old place, whether it's identity or whether it's projects or something external.
Yeah. And like we always say, so sober tools are life tools, right? So there might be other stuff that's going on for you, and that sort of cycle of change. We do have to kind of let stuff go. We need to make space, don't we? If you want to change something, you need to let go of something, and then you need some time just to let it settle. This big and huge learning for me, it's like coming out of being reactive into proactive, so that intentionality of not just going, I got too much, because there's so much of it is about overwhelm, like I've had multiple burnouts throughout my life. So many of the clients I work with, they are juggling so many things. So it's like, right, how can we clear space? Rule number 1, let's stop drinking, clear space, and then set things down, and then just what can we take off the list? Permission to pause. Okay. What can we take off the list?
That's grace right there. Permission to pause.
Yeah. And so many of us don't know how to do that because we're stuck in a survival state of making sure we belong and are accepted. And even as a woman, it's not that many generations ago that we didn't have financial power, right? We didn't have purchasing power to live in our own house. So even generationally, we're not that far off that thing of feeling like we need to belong and be accepted. So we do people please by survival, right? So it's hard to then go, okay, actually I'm going to put myself first.
People pleasing mentality is rough because I learned that people pleasers need boundaries because takers don't have any. Right? Like we just, as women, we're just sort of conditioned to give and give and give and give. That's what motherhood is about, right? You just give endlessly. It's self-sacrifice.
So it's like when someone, through taking, an hour to read this book, or just taking some time, or, working with a coach or whatever it is, just that permission to pause and just go, right, and then your nervous system can calm down enough for you to actually make a good decision. Because of course your brain's going to go to what's the easiest, fastest way that I can sort this out, right? I have a drink, because that's what I've done for the last 15-20 years of my life. But it's like, if you pause, let it settle, take some sort of winter time, get under a blanket, light a candle, write it down, and then just see what it might happen tomorrow when you're out of that reactive state. Because I know we have it with our kids. It's just like, I can't, and I had it as a teacher because I was I got to a very high level as an English language professor in a French university. My grammar is terrible, but I'm really good. But I'm really good at talking to people, and I'm really, you know. But so I would they'd ask me these really tricky kind of grammar questions, and I'd be like, I think it's a conditional clause from like trying to make it up. And then I just learned to say, that's a really interesting question.
Oh, let me
You
get back
know,
to you.
I'm just gonna make sure, you know, that I get absolutely, you know, all the information that you need. I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's the same with my kids. It's like, I cannot think right now because there's so much noise that, you know, so I'm just gonna go to the loo or the bathroom or the
Yes.
restroom, and I'll be back, you know, I'll be back. And then it's just that moment can just change everything, can't it?
Oh my God. It just reminded me of a story like when my kids were little and they were coming at me, you know, they just can come at you, right? And I would say, do you want nice mommy or do you want mean mommy? Because that bitch is this close. Right. And they'd be like, we want nice mommy. Because they've seen that bitch go crazy. It's like it's such a funny thing. We lose our shit once in a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nobody that can push you to your breaking point like your
Yeah.
kids, you know,
But it's
because of,
most of it is your nervous system's just
yeah.
like completely shut down. So you've gone into fight, right? You've gone into survival state of fight, of just like,
Yeah.
you know, get out of my way.
All the way out.
Yeah.
I've been reading this really interesting book called What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry.
I've
Have
got
you read
it.
it?
I haven't read it, but I got it on the shelf.
Oh my gosh, yeah, bust it out because
Mm.
it really, I love the science because it makes me feel like it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Right. It impersonalizes my experience to be like, it kind of takes the shame out when I understand what's happening to
Yeah.
my body.
Yeah.
And what I learned, I think the biggest takeaway from that book is that as we're developing, if we experience trauma, as you know, we earlier defined it, growing up, then it actually affects the way our nervous system develops. And it explains why some of us are labeled as overly sensitive or you're just being a drama queen. You know, it's like, it really explains why we develop this hypervigilance. It's encoded into our nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. So we do need, once we have that awareness, then we can put some protective boundaries around ourselves, like noticing when my nervous system is hijacked and being like, I need a break.
Yeah.
Or mean mommy comes up.
Yeah. And again, that's something that we look at in the book. So, you know, we've separated all the kind of, you know, fight, flight, freeze and fawn, which are the kind of,
I love that you include the fawn in there.
Yeah.
Where was the fawn? I saw that.
I think it's in, now it
Putting you on the
makes
spot.
but yeah, it makes sense with the, because, you know, I tell you, the organization.
It's in spring.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Fawns are born in the spring.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's part of it. It's kind of like we just want to give people tools, you know, just, you know, tool yourself up. The more that you can be self-aware and the more that you can catch yourself, the less, you know, it's not about a state of deprivation. It's, you know, my life is fantastic since I stopped drinking, you know, but I need a lot of tools to help me out because I didn't have them.
Yeah, there's this idea of sufficient substitute, right? You can't take something away like alcohol that's been your coping mechanism without replacing it with something intentional and healthy. And I love all the tools that you have in this. Would you say that in combination with the tools that how does community work with this?
Yeah, well, there is the Love Sober community. So Kate still runs the community that we set up together.
Okay.
And yeah, and we and what, in terms of my own community or in terms of,
well, if somebody is looking at getting sober, I think it's important to have tools, but I also
for
feel
sure,
like
to have
communities,
community.
to have communities. So you guys still have the
Yeah.
sober community, the Love Sober community.
Yeah. And also, you know, we're both She Recovers designated coaches.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, which is an amazing community. You know, there's
Are
so
you still,
many
sorry to
now.
interrupt you. Are you still facilitating the meetings? Are you
Yeah.
still running? Oh, you have to tell me when. I would love to show up to your meetings. That'd be fun.
I think I'm doing them twice a month, the early Monday meeting.
Okay.
And
I'll put it in the show notes in case y'all want to
yeah.
come with us. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and I think it's what, you know, AA, ACA, Al-Anon, you know, the Phoenix is a great community all around fitness, soberistas. They're amazing. Not that
There's
many
a
people know.
Phoenix group out here too. I had never heard of it before.
Yeah, we had one of the sort of collaborators on the podcast, and it's amazing.
Nice.
Like, it's all around kind of fitness.
And adventures.
Yeah, and they have like hundreds of free classes every day online, and you know, it's completely free. The only sort of sign up is that you've got 24 hours of sobriety, and that's it. And yeah, there's so many now we're, you know, you can find your fit, and just, you know, and I think with community, it is just kind of just keep, you know, if you don't like that 12-step meeting, try another, you know, just keep going, like, because you'll find, or reach out to someone and ask them, you know. And I mean, I certainly with clients, you know, we sometimes have to go through a few different things for them to find what works for them. I've actually just set up a group for my clients, because a lot of my clients, yeah, they haven't quite found their group yet. So I was like, okay, well, let's, you know, you all know,
talk to each other.
you all know me, so let's start with that. But yeah, I think community is hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helpful to hear other people's experience of how they use some of these tools.
Yeah.
Just talking this all out. This is really, really a beautiful book. So many tools. And I like how it sort of cycles through like so many different tools, so that you don't kind of get stuck in a boring pattern of, and there's so much to remember too, right? So it's nice to have it all written out so that you can cycle back through it as you need to.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, if we only indulge in nice pens and stationery, then, you know, I think we're doing okay. Like, yeah. So buy yourself a nice journal and a sparkly pen, and, you know, and sit down. And yeah, I mean, I think writing is so powerful for so many people, like just journaling and taking that time. And again, that taps into your kind of, that inner child or whatever. I mean, I used to keep a diary when I was a kid, and that was where I put my emotions and my feelings. And so I've taken that back up as an adult, you know, to do the same thing.
There's actually a lot of science around writing into recovery and writing to heal. I love that. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about in terms of the book? And
what, this book?
Oh, that beautiful book right there.
No, I think we've covered it all. Yeah. It comes out on the 1st of November, I think, in the US.
So it'll come out really soon. Actually, by the time this is published, it'll be out and available. I will leave links in the show notes. If people want to read, I know you're still doing coaching and things. If someone wants to reach out to you and work with you directly, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
My website is mandymanners.com. I do quite a lot of stuff on Instagram, so it's at Mandy Manners Coach. And Kate is at lovesober.cic on Instagram, and lovesober.com is her website as well.
Yes, we mustn't forget Kate. I just love her. She was on the podcast too. I'll leave a link to Kate's episode. We had a lot of fun. So I'll leave links to both your episodes, links to all the socials, and how people can get a hold of both of you. And of course, the beautiful
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing this on YouTube, you will have to go online.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. We'll talk again real soon.
Oh, thanks so much.